Good morning. For those of you who are fairly new or visiting for the first time, you are so welcome today. But this service is going to be a little different from my usual services. Usually I try and make them funny. It's not going to be funny today because what I'm trying to do is offer information so that we all have a similar idea of what's going on. You see, our congregation is in the middle of transition. We're currently between ministers. We're in the search process, and I believe we may be looking at getting a part-time minister or something, which will be a new experience for us. We've always had full-time ministers. And the process of looking may take a bit of time, and maybe not. First off, you should know that we have church polity, which means that we choose our own minister. No one is sent to us. There is a pool of ministers that have UU credentials that I'm sure we'll be looking at, but we're not limited to that. We can look anywhere. Here in our congregation, a search committee has been formed, and I've asked our board president, Chuck, to come up and give us an update of where we are on that front.
We do have a search committee, as you all know. There are 6 of us, and our first task will be to try to define who we are as we put ourselves out there to try to attract someone to us. We, of course, want to know who they are, and we'll be looking at resumes and sermons and so on. But we have to be able to describe ourselves, and I think it's going to be a little bit tough in the sense that we're pretty diverse, we're pretty different. As we learned in our adult forum this morning, we have even a hard time defining what we believe. We try to talk about that, and we got in all kinds of different directions. It was a very interesting discussion. But I think the best way to do that is actually to have conversations with ourselves, and that's what we're going to be doing, is to setting up these opportunities for us, either in person or on Zoom, to actually have some conversations. And these are like our covenant conversations that we had a few months back. But these will be about who are we as a church? And we're not trying to come to one specific answer, because I think the answer is just really very broad, and it describes us in all kinds of different ways. But I think that's going to be attractive to new ministers or potential ministers coming in. So that's step number 1. So look out for that. Watch for the announcements coming up. We'll have some opportunities, hopefully several opportunities for folks to participate. And hopefully in each group we get some folks who have been here a long time, some folks who are new, all kinds of different people in each different group, just so that we can have a really robust discussion. And I'll bet the results will be pretty interesting.
Thank you. Mostly what the service is going to be from here on is me giving you background. Now, remember the reading we had about the housefly and what happens if you increase its size. It may be just twice as big, but it weighs a lot more, and it needs stronger legs and definitely bigger wings. And we, as a growing congregation, are in the same situation. We are changing, and we may need to change some of who we are and how we function. Imagine, if you will, you're visiting a UU congregation and you've never been there before. You walk in and there are 5 people. Imagine for a moment what that feels like. It's probably just somebody's living room, or maybe a very small storefront. But there's only 5 people, 6 with you. Notice how you are greeted. and how they talk with one another. Now imagine you're visiting a different UU congregation, and this time there's about 50 people. This is not in somebody's living room. Might be a storefront, but it might be something a little more formal. A converted doctor's office or a small church building. And notice the difference in the way you are greeted and the way they treat each other. Now imagine you're visiting a church with 500 people. It's probably a very large space, definitely churchy. There are doubtless tables with literature and folks stationed to give you information. Each of these places are different because of the needs of the size of the congregation. A living room works if you only have 5 people, but if you have 50, you need a larger space. And other things are different too. Whether or not you have a minister, how many ministers? Do you need extra room for kids? How are the decisions made? Who does the work? And all of that has been made into a formal study called church size theory. And it seems to apply regardless of theology. And at this point, could you please put the poster up for us to see? I'm using 4 different sizes. Some say 6, but for our purposes, 4 is fine. You'll notice the smallest one is a family-sized church. They have 2 to 50 people. I want you to know there are 41 UU congregations that have under 10 members. That scares me. And 32% of our congregations have under 50. By the way, that's usually the number of people that are here on a Sunday morning, not just the membership. And you figure that if you have 100 members and 40 people make it on a Sunday morning, you're doing very well. About 40% is what you'd expect for people to show up. This is 32% of all of our Unitarian congregations. And it's group-centered. It's focused on survival when you're this small. Everybody gets involved in everything. If you have a potluck, everybody shows up. If you have a fundraiser, everybody shows up. The governance is by matriarchs and patriarchs. If they have a minister, it's usually part-time, and he or she usually functions more or less as a chaplain. The disagreements are bad because they take the form of family feuds in this size. Now the next size is the pastoral, 51 to 150. That's 38% of all Unitarian Universalist congregations. We are squarely in the pastoral mode. On an average Sunday, we have over 60, and our membership is 117, so we're obviously pastoral. Now, most pastoral churches are centered on the minister, which is problematic for us right now since we're between. We have some whole church activities where all of us get involved, but we have a lot of small groups that also meet, like the bad movie night and the quilters. The governance is still, we have matriarchs and patriarchs, but they're just on the governing board. New people can get involved very easily. This is one of the easiest sizes to join. The minister is usually at the center of programs, And the minister is usually why new people join, because of the minister drawing them in. So that's one of the things that we have to do now that we don't have a minister. Ministers are often stretched, they need additional staff, but resources are almost always limited. And fights in this size of a congregation tend to be over information, communication, and what on earth is the minister supposed to be paying attention to. The next size is program. Now, the program churches are 150 to 350. 23% of our congregations are in this size. They usually have more than one minister. But surprisingly, the relationships are more between groups within the congregation. You'll have a men's group, a women's group, a teenage group, and then you have the overlapping groups. Sometimes the Buddhists, the Christians, the humanists. The governance in this is the committees have power, and the overall board is more oversight directed and more relational. The minister is seen as an administrator and a delegator, and you have to watch out for the danger of micromanaging. The fights in this size are over resources and priorities. And then there's the corporate size, 350 plus. 7% of our UU congregations are over 350, and 5 of those are in Minnesota. I haven't figured that one out yet. They have a lot going on, but it is minister-centered. The minister is the one that represents everybody in the community. A lot of staff, often 3 to 4 or 5 ministers even. Ministers pretty much a CEO, and the fights are usually between program units and staff. Okay, thank you. No one size is better than another. Every size has its charms, and every size has its own issues, and every congregation is unique, even within this. Now, 2 things that we have in our denomination that I haven't found in a lot of other churches. One is the joys and concerns. Now, in the family-sized church, boy, that's vital. You want to know what's going on with everyone. In our size church, it's still important. For me personally, it's one of the reasons I come here, because I love to hear what's going on. I want to know what's happening in my fellow congregations' lives. But because of size, we do need to keep to the headlines. In larger churches, sometimes they do away with joys and concerns, or I've even seen some where you come in and if you have a joy or concern, you write it up on a piece of note paper and someone reads them during that part of the service. And in really large churches, they either don't have it at all or they have a candle that you light before or after the service. That's one of the reasons I love this size, because we have just the right amount for joys and concerns. One thing that a lot of our churches have, and this one doesn't, or at least it hasn't since I've been here, is a talk back. Now, a talk back is when, after the sermon is given, you get to say what you think. And in smaller churches, it's during the service. So you're held captive while somebody else holds forth. In a size like our church, what we might want to do if we decide we'd like to do that, and I do invite you to do that today if you want, is after the service, go get your coffee and then come on back. If people show up, we'll have a talk back. If you don't, we won't. Simple as that. Since we don't have a minister, we do have extra challenges. But, oh, this is such a wonderful time. We get to explore different ideas about what we want this church to be. Do we want it to be a public church or a private church? A public church is noted for its outreach, usually social justice work. Often it's locally, like a food pantry or homeless shelter. Sometimes it's in conjunction with other congregations. A private church focuses more on meeting the needs of the individuals inside the congregation. And as Chuck mentioned in the adult forum this morning, we can have both. We can have a congregation that meets the needs of the congregation so they can go out and make the world a better place to live. Since we're between ministers, it's also a great time to explore questions about the ministry of the congregation. This congregation, what is our ministry? Second Church, where I did my intern in Chicago, saw themselves as a teaching church because they were in the same city as Meadville, which is one of our seminaries. So people needed to do an intern, they would go to Second Church, and Second Church would teach them how to be ministers. Other congregations see themselves as a sanctuary church, maybe with lots of AA or NA meetings. And still other understandings of sanctuary are congregations that help immigrants or even refugees. In certain states right now, there are UU congregations that are helping families with transgender kids, helping them to move to states where it's a little safer. And there are congregations in the receiving states helping them to get adjusted with jobs, housing, etc. And what is our ministry? What do we want to be? It's one of the things we get to explore. In the year 2023, there were some very credible UU scholars that said, we're down to 1,003 congregations in the United States. By the year 2025, we will be in the 500s. And they were very serious about that. Respectfully, I disagree, and the numbers prove me right. Just the opposite. I think there is a growing need for places like us. In our increasingly mobile society where we move around, there is a thirst for community. Our children may be in Minneapolis, our parents in Sarasota. Our siblings may live in New York or Iowa. And we still have those family ties. They're important. But there's a need for people that are immediate, who are in our lives, that might be aware of us. Community is vital to human well-being. And if you should move to a new place, one of the best things you can do to find community is to find a UU congregation of any size. Chances are you'll fit right in. Surprisingly, in the year 2024, we still have 987 viable congregations, and that's after 3 years of COVID, when hundreds of churches have shut down. We lost only 20. And those that remain often find themselves revitalized because of Zoom. But in my not too humble opinion, far too many of our congregations are fixated on growth. Everyone wants to be bigger. The American obsession, bigger is better. Respectfully, I disagree. That's the wrong emphasis. No. Hear me out. I like new people coming in, and I love it when they decide to stay. But I don't want to grow for growth's sake, and I don't want to grow because we'll have more money in the collection plate. I want to grow because I want us to be a safe and available place for people who want what we have to offer. I want to welcome new folks with open arms, not because we'll grow, although we will, but because we have an opportunity to get to know more wonderful, caring, searching, idiosyncratic human beings. I love it. We will get to share their joys, their sorrows, their stories, their insights, their laughter, and the peculiar individual gifts that each one of us brings here. And there is another aspect of what we offer that I think the world needs. Yes, we do appreciate all sorts of different religions and philosophies, but we actually welcome that in our congregations. That's up close and personal. You're probably sitting very near someone who has a whole nother idea about ultimate reality than you do. So what? If we were to have a discussion on whether or not there's life after death, some of us would say we believe in a life recycling system, reincarnation. Some of us might say we just go on, but we meet up with loved ones. Some of us might say this is it. We only have this one short, precious life. And a goodly number of us will say, we have no idea. And while we disagree with each other, no one is throwing stones. No one is evil because they think differently. In fact, we're probably laughing and smiling along with each other as we share. Sometimes, just sometimes, when we are at our best, we actually listen to each other. Sometimes, just sometimes, we can see the value of an idea that has nothing to do with what we think. And sometimes we can hear what someone else might think, and we can disagree, but agreeably. We don't have to put the other person down. We don't have to convert them. Imagine that. Imagine if we could do that with politics. Imagine if we could sell that concept of disagreeing agreeably to all our fellow citizens. And you know as well as I do, we don't always live up to that ideal. We do mess up. We're apt to get mad or frustrated, although it's more likely to be about the use of the conference room than about theology. We aren't perfect, but we come back together, back into covenant. We do try, and sometimes we succeed. My friends, I think that fact that we even attempt to accept one another and care about one another with all our differences, that is a miracle. So be it.